When most Americans hear the term Obamacare, they shudder at the thought of them paying for everyone else's health care. A poll taken by me of 20 random people revealed that 13 out of those 20 people didn't even know that Obamacare was not the official name of the law which was implemented this past year in the United States. So what is it that makes people feel this way? Is it the fear of change? The fear of the unknown? Is it ignorance that drives the opposition? These are some of the things that we will look at over the next few minutes while I convince you that universal health care is the way to go in the United States. First off, let's get something straight. The Affordable Care Act, which most know as Obamacare, is not a universal health care system. It is, in fact, just a way to protect the American individual from the insurance companies. Does the system require every American to have health care insurance? Indeed. Has the cost of insurance risen since implementation? Absolutely. These costs are in direct response to the Affordable Care Act implementation and was expected by the Obama administration, but was necessary in order for insurance companies to remain afloat due to the fact that the law also guarantees coverage for all Americans and required insurance companies to change their policies as to who they will cover and who they will decide not to. This in itself made coverage available to all Americans, regardless of their current health situation. Now, putting all that aside, let's talk about what universal health care actually is. According to the New York Times, universal health care means that one national government entity is responsible for paying for and providing health care for all of its citizens. As you can see, the Affordable Care Act does not require any action from the government and leaves medical care to the private sector. We call this partial regulation. Regulation being the government ensuring that actions in a certain area take place. A good example of regulation, or partial regulation, is the airline industry. Before the Deregulation Act of 1978, all commercial flights in the U.S. were approved by the government. If you didn't have approval, your company was not allowed to provide flight for hire. In the semi-deregulated system, the current system, the U.S. government created an open market, but still held on to the ability to ensure the safety of flight in the U.S. by keeping lawmaking part of aviation within the government entity. This is kind of what the Affordable Care Act does. It says the free market that U.S. healthcare was will no longer be, and the government will now ensure that A, each citizen has an insurance policy, and B, the insurance companies will provide insurance without prejudice to all citizens. This is obviously not all that the Affordable Care Act does. There are many intricacies within the law which are too numerous to review. But that is the intent of the bill, to insure America. So why should the U.S. government go to a universal care system? Well, first and foremost, according to Business Insider, back in 2000, the World Health Organization ranked the American healthcare system as 37th in the world. I'll repeat that. 37th in the world. Let that number sink in. This ranking puts the U.S. not only behind countries like Australia, Canada, Sweden, the United Kingdom, or Germany, but behind countries like Costa Rica, Denmark, Israel, and Saudi Arabia. Obviously, the list goes on, and in most countries that outrank the U.S., there is a private sector of insurance coverage. But the government controls such things as how much a citizen will pay and how much a procedure will cost. In cases where the procedure costs more than what the government covers, the private insurance, usually provided by the person's employer, will cover the remainder. What about the opposition to universal health care? BalancedPolitics.org created a list of pros and cons of universal health care, and I wanted to read you a couple of the cons. 1. There isn't a single government entity or division that runs effectively in the U.S. Do we really want an organization that developed the U.S. tax code handling something as complex as healthcare? 2. Free isn't really free, since we the American people must pay for it with higher taxes or spending cuts in other areas such as defense or education. The list talks about how profit motives, competition, and ingenuity will decrease because there will be nothing gained by developing new treatments if companies will not make enough money to justify its cost of research and development. It talks about the reduction of doctor flexibility, which would lead to poor patient care. But let's be clear. There would be changes which affect how people would see their doctors, how doctors would provide patient care, how much our taxes may rise or spending be diverted from other programs. But to me, these are all responses, as real as they might be, that show that companies, the top 1%ers, and the Republican Party in particular, are afraid that their bottom lines would be affected by the change. I personally strongly believe that there needs to be a change, even from the current Affordable Care Act system. And this is coming from a person whose medical coverage went from $25 a month before implementation to $260 a month after. Does the hurt change? Yeah. But was the former system any better? Not really. While many insurance premiums went up, my prescription costs went down considerably. There was a time not too long ago when the medication my doctor prescribed to me just cost too much for me to justify spending. But now, with the Affordable Care Act and the increased premiums, those prescriptions cost next to nothing for me. So yes, there are changes coming. And yes, the medical field will be affected. Which leads into my point about people being afraid of change. Is it then? Are people really hindering the implementation of a better system because they are afraid? Maybe. The bottom line here is that no one person can be sure that universal health care in the U.S. would be bad for the economy or the individual. If we look at examples like Canada, France, the United Kingdom, then we see that the systems do work. Are they all the same? No. They are tailored to the individual country. But they are universal. Everyone in these countries has the opportunity to see a doctor if they are ill. And that's the bottom line. People like myself will not be afraid to see a doctor because of the fear that they would not be able to cover their expenses. Did you know the number one reason for bankruptcy in the U.S. is healthcare costs? That's right. It's not divorce or people's drive to spend more money than they have to get the next best thing. It's healthcare costs. According to CNBC, nearly 2 million people in the U.S. will file bankruptcy this coming year due to costs of healthcare. That also includes people with insurance, I mind you. So with all the politics surrounding this very fragile issue, and all the smoke and mirrors the opposition creates, like naming the Affordable Care Act Obamacare in an attempt to downplay it, the American people, you, me, and the rest of the country should stand up. Tell our congressmen, it's time to stop throwing propaganda in our face, and time to start coming up with a plan to get the U.S. back on top where we belong, not in 38th place. We should be setting the example to the world, not following other countries' examples, all while helping our citizens live better, healthier lives. Thank you.